Welcome to the React crash course. React is a very popular JavaScript library for building user interfaces like this one you see right now in the web browser. React could be run in the web browser or on the server using Node.js or in mobile applications using React Native. In this crash course, I'll teach you key features of React like JSX, components, props, and state. In this crash course, I don't want to spend time on setup of the computer for development of the React applications, and that's why I decided to show you all examples in the web browser. And there is a service called Code Sandbox, and here you could create different sandboxes and the code online and see results online. Please navigate to codesandbox.io and click here Create Sandbox. And here on this page you'll see which types of sandboxes you could create. There are multiple official templates like React, Vanilla, Vue, Angular, and so on and so forth. You could try many different frameworks and many different technologies. I recommend you to create an account here by going to sign in. In such case, you will be able to store your sandboxes and to share them with others. And also you will be able to get to them later on and make some edits if you want to do so. You could sign in with GitHub or sign in with Google. Let me sign in, I already have an account. I successfully logged in, and now let's create a new sandbox using official template React. Please find it here in the list of official templates and simply click on it. You'll see that some magic will happen, and in a moment you'll see that the React application will be created. Here is app.js file, here are other files like index.js, styles.css and package.json, and also it was started in the web browser. It means that just in few clicks you are able to get running React application. Here above you'll see name of your application, and you could always rename it. Let me rename it to React Crash Course, like that. Please notice that any sandbox that you create using free account is public, and anyone in the world is able to find it and run same as you do. I'll keep this particular sandbox in my account, and using this URL you see now on the screen, you are able to access final version of the React application that I'll create by the end of this crash course. But I highly recommend you to follow me along and go step by step along with me in order to understand all React concepts. Alright, so here on the left you see files in your project. There is public folder with index.html file inside. There is src folder with some files like app.js, index.js and styles.css, and there is package.json file. src folder actually contains all source files that are required for our React application. And at the moment there are only two JavaScript files and one style.css file. And that's how our application looks right now in the web browser, and it contains one h1 HTML tag with text hello code sandbox, here it is in the web browser, and there is also h2 HTML tag with text start editing to see some magic happen. And that's what we will start with right now, and we could modify, for example, this text and add here a couple of exclamation marks like that. And you'll see immediately results here in the web browser. It means that you don't even need to save particular files because this file is now unsaved. Here you see this dot, but in the web browser, here in this sandbox, you will see changes immediately. If you are happy with them, you could save them by pressing key combination on Mac Command S, on Windows Ctrl S like that, and file was just saved. Great. Now let me explain you first how our React application is actually rendered in the web browser, how those texts, hello code sandbox and this one, are injected into the document object model in the web browser. Let's first have a look inside of the public folder at index.html file. Here it is. And inside of this index.html file, if you scroll a bit down, you'll find in the body section such HTML tag as div, and it has single attribute ID with value root. That's actually all contents of this index.html file. And basically here on the right we see exactly this index.html file. And React basically injects entire React application into this div with ID root. If you try, for example, modify name of this ID here, let's save changes like that and refresh web browser here, you'll get React error. Target container is not a DOM element. And there is an error in the index.js file here on the line 7. Let's go to index.js file and observe contents of it. Here in this file we import the strict mode from React, we import React DOM from React DOM. Please ignore those lines for now. And also we import app from app file, app.js file that is located near index.js file. And here on the line 7, using React DOM render function call, we render our React application into the root element. And root element is particular HTML element that is found inside of the document using getElementById function call. And we are looking for particular HTML element by ID root. And that's how our React application is actually injected into the document object model. It finds specific HTML element with ID root. And I just removed such element with ID root, and now there is an element with ID root too, and that's why now a React application is not able to be rendered inside of the DOM. And that's why we get here this error. Alright, let me go back to ID root here and save changes, and immediately you'll see again our application here inside of the web page. You could very easily insert other HTML elements here inside of the app.js file. For example, you could copy this line, let me do that like that, paste it below, and now you should see two texts hello code sandbox. Also, you could add other HTML elements. For example, you could add button. Let me replace h1 here with button, and closing HTML tag will be button as well. And now I should see button with text hello code sandbox on it. That's our plain HTML text, like button, h1 and h2. Now let me demonstrate you how you could adjust the styles of the React application. At the moment there is such file as styles.css, and this class name here that refers to app actually takes specific class name that is defined inside of the styles.css file. And if you remove this line or comment it out by pressing key combination command / on Mac or Ctrl / on Windows like that, you'll see that styling was adjusted and now all lines are not centered anymore. Let's now uncomment this line by pressing same key combination, and now all our HTML elements are centered back again because of this class name. If I remove it from here like that, you'll see again that styling will not be applied. Let's now open up styles.css file and try to modify app class there. You could open up Explorer by clicking on this icon, or if you want, you could use shortcut Command B on Mac or Ctrl B on Windows like that. And let's open up styles.css file. And inside of this file I see now only single class that is called app, and there are two attribute value pairs. Font family is set to sans serif and text align is set to center. I could modify it and, for example, adjust text align to right like that, and now all our elements were aligned to the right. If you want, you could try to modify, for example, color of the text by setting color attribute, and let's set its value to yellow, like this. And now text color was modified to yellow. That's how you could modify app style if you want to do so. Let's leave it as it was generated by default, and let's close styles.css. That's how you could insert styles into your React application. You need to create CSS file and import it, for example, inside of the app.js file, and afterwards you are able to use any class names using class name JSX attribute. Please notice, not HTML attribute, it is JSX attribute. Now let me explain to you what is functional component. And basically here in the app.js file you see example of the functional component. In React it is possible to create class-based components and functional components. Class-based components require to create particular class with different methods, and functional components require only to define a function. Class-based components are a bit more difficult to create and maintain. Functional components are more simple. And using React hooks, you could actually completely get rid of class-based components and don't use them in the React applications and go on only with functional components. And that's why in this crash course I will not explain to you how to use class-based components. I will focus only on functional components, like for example here. React functional component is simply a function, like we see here. And also using export statement, you need to export this function from the file in order to be able to use it in the other files. If I, for example, remove export default keywords from here, of course our application will crash, because now I see such error as element type is invalid, expected string, and so on. And that's because now we don't export this particular function from this app.js file. But inside of the index.js file, we actually import app from the ./app file. Let's go back to app.js file and insert export default statement here. And actually I recommend to you use export default statement underneath actual function. Let me show you how to do that. Let me remove export default from here and add export default line here. And add here name of the variable I want to export from this file. And I see exactly the same result. Now, you could use traditional function declaration like in this example, and also if you want, you could use arrow function syntax. And you could very easily convert this traditional function to arrow function using following syntax: const app equal sign, and here will be arrow function syntax like that. And result is the same as before. Now we define new variable app, and here is its value. It is actually arrow function. All arrow functions are anonymous, they don't have name. But using such assignment, we assign arrow function to the variable with particular name, in our example app. That's how you could create functional component in React and export it using export default statement. Default means that the app is exported as default export from this particular module, because now we are talking about different modules. And here in the index.js file we import from another module its default export. That's why here on this line we don't need to add here those curly braces. If I add them here like that, I'll definitely get an error. Because now I am trying to import element that is not exported from the app module. Alright, let's go back to import app from app and go back to app.js file. That's what is functional component, and in a nutshell it is just function that returns some JSX code here. If you don't return anything, for example, if you remove return statement from here and let's say assign this to specific variable like a, you will see such error: nothing was returned from render. Because React expects that each component returns JSX code. That's why let's go back here to return statement like that. That's all for overview of the React functional components. And next, let's try to use variables inside of the JSX code. Let's here, before return statement, define new variable, and let's use const here, and let's name it text, and its value will be hello code sandbox. Let me copy it from here, and here in double quotes I'll simply insert this text like that. And now here on this line or anywhere in other places in the JSX code, I could utilize this JavaScript variable. And if you want to write JavaScript code inside of the JSX, you need to put here pair of two curly braces like that. And now inside you could insert any JavaScript expression. And variable is actually an expression, and you could use it like that, and now I see same result as before. I see text hello code sandbox on this button. And if I modify it, for example, to click me like that, you'll see that text on the button will be modified as well. That's how you could utilize JavaScript variables inside of the JS6 code. For that, you need to add pair of two curly braces like that. Now, quick challenge for you, please extract this text to the variable and define it before return statement and use it here inside of the h1 tag. Let's do that together. Let me cut it from here and let's define new variable here and let's name it text2, for example, and its value will be JavaScript string hello code sandbox, and let's insert it here using pair of curly braces. It's an indication that here will be JavaScript expression and here will be text2 like that. And now I see same result as before. Now it's time to demonstrate to you how you could create your own components and reuse them inside of other components. At the moment, this component app.js does not use any other external to it components. There are no other import lines except this one. And if there are some redundant blocks of JS6 code in one of the components, for example, if I replace h2 here with h1 like that, we will see here basically two very similar blocks of JS6 code here and here. Both utilize h1 tags and both use some text in between. And if there are such redundant, let's say, blocks of code of JS6 code, it makes sense to create custom component and reuse it whenever you want. Let me show you how to do that. Let's open up Explorer here and let's in the src folder create new folder by clicking on this icon and let's give it name components like this. And inside of this components folder, let's create new file and let's call it large text like this. And let's give it extension .js. Please notice that I started its name with uppercase L. And it's a convention to use first uppercase letter when you are about to create any kind of React component inside of this particular file. So name will be large text.js. And now inside of this file, let's create new React functional component. And let's use similar syntax. Let's define new variable and it will be large text variable and its value will be arrow function, and let's export default it inside of this large text file. And afterwards we will be able to reuse this large text component inside of other components, for example app.js component. So let's define new variable with help of const and let's give it name same as name of the component large text. And actually it's a convention to use such kind of variable names, and basically here in the app.js file you see same approach. Name of the variable is app, same as the name of the file app.js, and the same variable is exported as default export from the file. Same approach we will use here. So let's assign value to this variable and it will be arrow function like that without any parameters. And here in the function block, let's return JS6, because React expects that you return JS6 in every functional component. And let's return here h1 like that, and here type some text. And let's close h1 tag like that. And now underneath this function, let's export default it from this file. Export default large text. Notice that same as in any code editor, you could use tab in order to autocomplete different names. So let's save changes in this large text.js file, and now we could try to use this large text component inside of other components, for example app.js. In order to be able to use it, you need to import it first. Import. Let's import large text from, and here will be path to large text.js file. Recap that we created separate folder components and the large text.js file is located inside of that folder. That's why here we need to specify complete path to that file. It will be dot current folder slash components. Notice that I see suggestion to add components here. And after slash will be large text. You don't need to add here extension of the file if it is a JavaScript file. So simply large text like that. And now we could very easily use this large text component inside of the app component. For example, let's use it here underneath this h1 HTML tag. And for that, you need simply type HTML-like syntax, and here simply type name of the component you want to insert. And if you want, you could use self-closing JSX tags, same as you do with self-closing HTML tags, like that. And now large text component was inserted to the app component. And here we see some text that comes from the large text component here. And now I'm able very easily reuse this particular component multiple times. For example, I could copy this line, paste it here again, and I see multiple some text here on the web page. That's beauty of components. You could very easily reuse them multiple times in different places, even in different other components. So, at the moment this large text component is static. It means that it always returns same JSX with some text inside of the h1 tag. And of course, in the real-world React applications, you'll almost never meet such kind of static components that always return same JSX code like in this example. And that's why next let me talk about component properties, or shortly props. Before doing that, let me remove those redundant large text components that are included in the app component, and also let me remove those two lines like that, and I don't need this text2 variable anymore. Let me remove it as well. So now there is only one variable text, there is button HTML tag, and there is large text component here in the app component. And now let's discuss how we could change this text that is returned from the large text component here in this return statement. For that, we could utilize React props. Let me show you how to do that. Here in the large text, same as in the HTML tags, we could add attributes. And for example, here we could add attribute, and let's call it text. And let's set its value to string some other text, like that. Don't forget to add closing double quote. Nothing was changed here on the web page, and I still see some text that is returned by large text component here on this line. But now let me add parameter to this arrow function, and let's call it props, like this. And now here, before return statement, let's simply print to the console value of the props variable, like that, inside of this arrow function. And now you could open up console by clicking on the console here in the right section, and at the end of the output you'll see such object with single key text, and its value is some other text. And this line definitely comes from this console log statement, where we print to the console value of the props variable, and props is parameter in this arrow function, and actually props are properties of this particular React functional component. And this object is very similar to what we pass here. We added here single attribute text with value some other text. Let me modify it, for example, to some other text with exclamation mark. And immediately I'll see that this object will be logged again to the console. And it means that anytime when property of specific component, in our example large text component, changes, component is re-rendered, and this function is executed once again, and view in the web browser is refreshed. So its rule: anytime when properties of particular component change, component is re-rendered. And in terms of JavaScript, it means that this function is executed by React again. Let's try to modify this value once again, add one more exclamation mark, and again I see this line of text here in the console. And it means that this component was re-rendered again. Let's add the one more property here, and let's name it, for example, text2, and let's set its value to ABC. Now here in this object I'll see two keys, text and text2. And now inside of this props object, it is actually an object, there are two keys. And you could extract particular keys from the object in JavaScript using destructuring syntax. And for that you need to add a line like this, const, next will be a pair of curly braces, and inside let's write two variables, text and text2, like that. Here will be equal sign, and on the right will be name of the variable we want to destructure from. It is props. And now text and text2 variables should contain corresponding keys from the props object. And I could log text and text2 here. Let's do that like that. Text. Let's copy this line and paste it here. And here let's log text2 like that. And now I see some other text as a result of this console log statement and ABC as a result of this second console log statement. That's how you could destructure particular properties from the props parameter inside of this functional component. And basically you could do that directly here instead of using this separate line of code. We could take this part from here, remove this line of code like that, and instead of props, insert here this object. It is not an object, it is actually destructuring syntax. Let's save changes, and now I see here same result. Some other text and ABC. Wonderful. Now let's actually get rid of text2, we don't need it for this particular large text component like that. And let's keep only text, and let's remove text2 attribute here. It means that using JSX attributes, you could pass particular properties to the components. And in this example, we pass property called text with such value to the component large text. And here, using such syntax, sorry, I forgot to remove this line. And here in the large text component, we use destructuring syntax in order to pull out particular key from the props object. And here we define new variable text directly here in the parameter section. And now inside of this functional component, we could use this variable anywhere. At the moment, we still return some text here. And now it's time to use this particular property that is passed to this large text component. And now, instead of some text here, we will use JavaScript syntax, pair of curly braces like that. And here will be any JavaScript expression. And let's type here text like that. We will use this variable. And now I see here some other text. That's how we could use properties inside of the large text component. Now let me get rid of this console log statement like that. And also let's try to adjust attribute that is passed to large text component here inside of the app component. And if I modify it here, let's add one more exclamation mark, immediately I see changes here. Because now this large text component returns different JSX depending on the properties that are passed to this component. And that's what we see here. Now I could very easily reuse this large text component several times and pass different text to it as JSX attributes. Let me show you how to do that. Let's go to app.js file, copy this line from here, paste it here underneath this line, and now adjust this text. Other text. And now I see some other text that is generated by this large text component and other text that is returned back by this component. And that's beauty of components. You could create component only once and reuse it multiple times. And look and feel of every instance of the component will be different. That's what we see here. You could reuse React components as many times as you want and pass different attributes. And in this way, you actually modify props inside of the component, like we did here in the large text component. Great. That's our props, and the main outcome is that you could modify props by passing different attributes in the JSX text like we did here. You could pass multiple props if you want to do so and if you need multiple props. And also React component is re-rendered anytime when one of the properties is changed. That's our React props, and that's how you could modify React props from the parent component, because app is parent component relative to large text component that is now child component of the app component. Alright, let's get rid of those two lines like that, and let's proceed, and next let's talk about React state. Let's assume that now we want to make our application dynamic, because at the moment nothing happens when I click on this button and this text actually does not change. And let's assume that now, after every click on this button, instead of this text, I want other text to be here, and it will be button was clicked 2, 3, 5, 6 times and so on. Each time when I click the button, this will be changed and the counter will be incremented. Let's try to achieve that. First, we already have large text component and we could modify text here. And we could write here, button was clicked, let's say 0 times. And now I will definitely see such text here. But now instead of this 0, we need to insert value of specific variable that will be modified upon click on this click me button. And let's try to do following. Let's try to define new variable and let's call it counter. Let's define it here using let counter, and let's set its value to 0. It is initial value of the counter. And here now as value of this attribute, let's use JavaScript syntax with string template literal inside of it. Let's first add here a pair of 2 curly braces because we are about to add here JavaScript code. And now let's replace double quotes here with backticks. Backtick button is located near button 1 on the left. And here replace this double quote with backtick as well, like that. And now in this template literal in JavaScript, I could insert any JavaScript expressions using following syntax. $sign, let's do that on the place of the 0, then pair of curly braces like that, and here inside could be any JavaScript expression, and here I'll put name of the variable, counter, like that. And at the moment, value of the counter will be 0, it is defined here, and I'll see same result as before. Button was clicked 0 times. That's how we prepared the value of the text property in the large text to be dynamic. And actually we could verify that, for example, here underneath this let counter statement, we could increase the value of the counter by 1, counter plus 0, 1, like that. And now I'll see that button was clicked 1 times. And that's because now value of the counter variable is 1. And it means that value of this counter variable at the moment when this large text component is rendered is equal to 1, because we modified it here. Now let's try to add onClick handler to this button. And anytime when we click on this button, value of the counter variable must be increased by 1. Let's do that. In HTML there is such attribute as onClick, like that. But in JS6 there is no such attribute. And in JS6 all attributes are actually in camel case. And that's why here you see suggestion to use onClick, where C is capital. Let's use it, onClick. And value of this onClick attribute will be actually a function. And we could either define function before return statement somewhere here, or we could define function here in line. And of course, first we need to put here a pair of curly braces because we are about to write JavaScript code here as value of the JS6 attribute. And here will be arrow function, and let's simply print to the console button was clicked, like that. Now let's open up console here and try to click on this button. Button was clicked and you see here a counter that is incremented, and it means that each time when I click the button, this function is actually called. And that's why I see button was clicked here in the console. Great. Now inside of this function, we could try to modify value of the counter. Let's try to do that. Let me remove console log statement here like that. And let's try simply type counter plus 0, 1. We are incrementing counter by 1. Now let's try to click on the button. And I see same text as before. I still see button was clicked 0 times. Let's go to large text.js file, and here before return statement, let's write console log statement like that. And let's simply print to the console component was rendered. Let's save changes. Let's open up console, And let's click on the button again. I see component was rendered only once, but when I click the button, this large text component is not re-rendered. But actually, this variable counter is changed, and we could verify that here inside of this function. Let me actually extract this function and define it separately here. Let's define new variable, const, onClick handler. Let's give such name to this onClick function, and its value will be arrow function without any parameters, like that. And here let me use body of the function, and let's again increment counter by 1, counter plus 0, 1, and let's also print to the console value of the counter, like that. And now instead of this function that was added here in line, let's simply add name of this onClick handler, onClick handler, like that. And now anytime when I click the button, this function, this one, will be called. Let's now test. Click once again, and I see counter that is incremented each time when button is clicked. And this means that this variable is incremented correctly anytime when we click the button. But this component, large text component, is not re-rendered. We don't see this text here in the console. And this is a very important moment for understanding. When some variables change, like for example variable counter is changed, and when value of particular property depends on such variable, React will not re-render such components as large text, for example. Again, even if such variable's counter is modified. And it means that now in the user interface, we see information that is actually outdated. We see counter that is 0, but in fact, now counter is equal to 8. We clearly see that here in the console. And that's where React state comes in. With help of React state, you could synchronize values of variables, like for example counter, with user interface, and re-render particular components each time when corresponding variables, for example variable counter, are changed. And that's what actually makes React applications reactive. They react and they are changed after modification of some variables. But such approach that we outlined here, we defined a new variable, then here we increment it, does not work, as we now see here. We need to use React state in the React components. And if we are using React functional components, then we could utilize React hooks and particular hook that is called useState. Let's now rewrite our app component and introduce here React state using useState React hook. First of all, we need to import useState from the React library. Let's do that here at the line 1. Let's add import statement, import. Here will be pair of two curly braces, and here let's type useState, starting from lowercase u. And let's import from React package. React package was installed as dependency of this project. And now we are able to use useState inside of this component. And let's use it here. Let's remove this line where we define counter variable like that. And here at the beginning of this function, let's do following. Let's call useState function, and let's pass 0 as single argument to it. And now here I see that this useState function will actually return array of two elements. First one will have type number, and second one is of type React dispatch. And now we could actually use destructuring in order to define two new variables. And we will call them counter and setCounter. Let's do that here on the left side. And let's define two new variables using const. Here will be destructuring syntax like that. Here will be equal sign. First variable will be named counter, and second one will be setCounter, like that. And now when our component is initially rendered, counter variable will be declared and its value will be initially set to 0. And now using setCounter function, we are able to modify value of the counter variable. And now this variable is actually part of the React state of this app component. How it will differ from the previous case where we defined a counter variable, we will see just in a moment. For now, we still see that button was clicked 0 times, and that means that now when our application was just rendered, counter will be set to 0. That's what we see here. And now in the onClick handler function, instead of incrementing counter like that, we need to call setCounter function. And as argument to it, pass new value for the counter variable. And that's why here we could simply pass expression counter plus 1. We take counter variable and increment its value by 1. And this value will be set as new value of the counter variable. That's how useState works. Now let's try to test our application and let's click on the button Click Me. And you know what? Now I see changes here in this text. Button was clicked 4 times at the moment. And after each click on the button, I see component was re-rendered. And this text comes from this line of code. And it means that anytime when counter variable here changes, React re-renders large text component that is dependent on that variable. And now user interface is fully synchronized with state of our application, because counter now is part of the state, and state is dynamic. It changes when user performs some actions like we do now here. We are clicking on the button. That's what is state. And that's how you could synchronize user interface with state using useState React hook. You just need to call useState function that is exported from the React and pass to it initial value of particular variable, in our case counter variable. And it will return actually array of 2 elements. And second element is function that you could call if you want to set new value of specific variable, in our case counter variable. That is state in React, and that's how you could create different state variables. If you want, you could call useState multiple times and define other variables, like text, setText, and so on, if you want to do so. That's React state, and that's how you could change React state. And basically now, if you want, you could use this counter variable in different components. For instance, we could reuse large text component here. Let's copy, for example, this line and paste it here. And let's modify text here and let's make it you clicked counter times like that. And now I'll see 2 instances of the large text component, and the number here is the same, and each time when I click the button, I see that both components, this one and this one, are re-rendered because counter changes. Great. Now let me make some adjustments here in this code. Let me remove this line and let's remove those empty lines. Also, let me rename this text to button text like that. And let's rename it here as well, button text. And that's it for our very simple React application. Let's now summarize. In this crash course, I explained to you key concepts of React, and now you know what is JSX. Here it is. It looks like HTML, but in JSX you could use HTML tags and other components like we did here. I explained to you how to create your own components, and here is an example of our own component that we use here in the app component like that. You know now what are props of the component, and text is one of the props in the large text component. And as attributes here, we could pass different values of the props to specific component. And component is re-rendered anytime when properties are changed, at least one property is changed. That's how React synchronizes user interface with actual state of the component. And React makes it by modification of the actual document object model that you see in the web browser. Also now you know what is state, And state is dynamic, it changes over life cycle of the React application. For example, after some interactions of the user, when button is clicked for example, or when some data is fetched from the server. You could also modify state in such case and re-render corresponding components. And I explained to you how to make use of the useState React hook in order to set different variables like for example counter and be able to update its value by calling for example such function as setCounter. And this function expects new value that will be set as value of this variable. That's how state could be modified. And React is clever enough to re-render corresponding components that are affected by the change of the React state. And notice again that counter is part of the state of the app component, not large text component. This component has only prop, text prop, and it is re-rendered anytime when this prop is modified. That's it. Also, in order to make React distinguish between HTML tags and other components, you need to use different first letters. If it is lowercase letter, then React understands that you want to insert plain HTML tag, like button. If it is uppercase letter, then React expects other component here, like for example large text component here in our example. Alright, that's it for this React application, and it consists of one app.js file, index.js file, and components folder with such component as large text. And actually, as additional challenge, you could also try to extract this button to separate component. Create new component called button inside of the components folder and put this code there. And here reuse such button component. I will not demonstrate you how to do that, but I hope that now you have enough knowledge to do that on your own. I wish you good luck guys, and thanks for watching this React crash course.